There we go. Started off with a mute. Thanks to everyone for being here. I'm going to give it another minute just to let other people connect to the event. And yeah, we'll get started in just a second. Great. I think that we can get started then. Great. So yeah, thank you everyone and welcome to this Wooclap training session. Really happy to be here with you today to look into a tool that's really going to revitalize classes and put interaction at the heart of your pedagogy. And here's a little overview of a little outline of today's session. So I'm Kieran Farrell, Customer Success Manager at Wooclap, and I'm joined today by my colleague Anaïs, who will be in the chat. And we're together going to give you the keys to succeeding with Wooclap. So please feel free to ask your questions in the question tab that you can see on the right side of your interface. You can also ask them in the chat, but the questions tab would be ideal. And Anaïs will be sure to answer them throughout the presentation. And of course, I'll also have time where I'm going to take a bit more time to answer your questions as well. So for the overview of today's session, it will last around 1 hour. And I'll start by giving you a little bit of context about Wooclap. And right after that, I'll be giving you the opportunity to experience the tool as a participant. And then I'll show you how to use Wooclap to enhance participation in class, whether it's in person or at a distance. And I'll go over how to create content and which functionalities to activate and to favor. And finally, I'll also have some time to go in, and we'll see how much time we have. But I'll have some time to go into some different use cases and maybe some concrete examples of how you can incorporate Wooclap questions into your courses. Now, without further ado, get started with the presentation and a little bit and a short amount of context on Wooclap. Now, Wooclap, just for a bit of context, is first and foremost a pedagogical tool that was founded on cognitive science research from the last decade in order to really rethink the way that we learn. And amongst the research in which it's founded, upon which it's founded, is the theory of French neuroscientist Stanislas Dehaene, according to whom there are 4 fundamental pillars of learning, which are attention. In order to learn, we need to be 100% focused, and distractions, of course, take away from our focus and have a negative impact on our learning. So this really brings us to the question of how do I captivate my audience's, my students' attention, but how do I maintain, how do I keep that attention throughout my class? The second pillar is active engagement. So in order to remember new content, it isn't enough to passively listen to the person presenting. It's better to emit your own hypotheses and experiment in order to fully understand these new notions and terms. And we'll see how Wooclap addresses this pillar. The third pillar is feedback. Of course, feedback allows you to assess your learning if and where you made a mistake. And we also know the sooner this feedback comes after the input was given, the more impact it has. And finally, the last pillar is consolidation. In order to learn, one must review content. And we're going to see how Wooclap can be a valuable tool before, during, and after classes. Now, we'll go into more detail on how Wooclap can address all of these pillars throughout the presentation. And I think at this point, you've understood that Wooclap is really going to be a great asset in creating interactive content that you can then incorporate into your existing presentations. And you can really structure your courses around this interactive content in order to encourage participation and student engagement, again, whether it's in person or at a distance. Now, of course, Wooclap goes even further than that, as it allows you to comment on the input that you're receiving live. So really going into that interactivity, and also gives you access to reports in order to follow the student progress. And of course, I think this is a key function and a key value that comes with digital tools is that all that data that you're collecting can ultimately be turned into very valuable insights, whether it's into the understanding of a student on an individual level, but also on the understanding of a class as a whole. So then you can really adapt and personalize the way that you teach and the resources that you make available to your students. Now, before I give you a chance to be a student and experience the tool on their end, I just want to remind you of some resources that we make available to you. We have a bunch of tutorials on our YouTube page, educational tips on our blog, and I'd say the answers to about 90% of the questions you come across when you start using the tool in our help center. It's quite thoroughly documented, so I really invite you to take a look at those. And now, without further ado, I'll have you participate. 1 second, sorry, I lost my page. And you can connect now via this link that you can see. So you can either scan the QR code that you can see on your left with your phone to connect to the event, or you can also join by clicking on the link that has been shared in the chat by my colleague Anais. Great. So as you can see at the bottom of my screen on the right-hand side in the bottom right corner, I can see how many people are connected on my event. So I know that right now there's about 26 of us, so I'm going to give it another second, and there's 19 people connected. So I'll give you another second to connect to the event before moving on to my interactive content. Thank you all for connecting. Good opportunity for you to see how easy it is to connect to an event, and then of course we'll go into how you can create it. And I think 21 is pretty good. And now we can move on to our first question. Where are you located on this map? Just get an idea. I know we usually, in the English open training sessions, usually get people from very different places. So it's always nice to see where everyone's connecting from. Very different time zones already. We've got Canada, I think some in Europe, maybe the UK. Great. Again, at the bottom of my screen, as you can see, I can see how many people have answered out of the total amount of people connected. So I can see I have 13 answers out of 24 people connected to my event. And of course, again, as you can see, as I'm receiving all of this input, I'm able to comment on it live as it's being displayed on the screen that I'm projecting to my audience. Well, thank you, everyone, for answering, but also for connecting to this event from various places in the world. It's nice to be here with you. And I won't spend too much time on this. You'll have other opportunities to participate later. And I'm going to move on to the next question right away then. Now going on to the next question. Describe your experience working from home in one word. This usually gets quite different opinions, quite different words that come up. Of course, we don't have all the same conditions to work from. So as you can see, as the words are coming in, my word cloud is shaping. I have the option to display my answers in various ways. So I can show my answers in a grid format by clicking on the left-hand side. These are my display options. So I have the grid format. So if I want, for example, I can click on one word to bring it up to the attention of my class. I can see it in the list format as well, or in a word cloud. The word cloud is really much more of a visual tool. Of course, as I'm receiving this input, it's always going to be changing around and moving around. So whenever I'm comfortable with the amount of answers I've received, I can go ahead and press on the little lock at the bottom here, which is going to lock in the answers. and people won't have the option of sending these answers in anymore. And as you can see, the word challenging has been made bigger. So this means that this word came in more than the others. So it really gives me the possibility very visually to know what different trends are coming out in the interactions that I've received. And it really gives me the opportunity to have a conversation with all of my class. Everyone can send in their input, and I can have a really good understanding of the general trends there are regarding this question, for example, for all of my class. So thanks again for all of your answers. And now moving on, just to get a little idea, a little polling question. Have you ever used Wooclap? So I have a little bit of an idea. Let's see, about half of you have never used it. Half of you never used it at the moment. And again, as you can see, as I'm receiving the input, I can comment on it live as everything's evolving live as I'm receiving it. And we'll see there's different options for display and all that, and we'll go into that later, of course. So I could see that for most of you, maybe just a little bit of experience, but I think those of you that have already used it, if you're still beginners, you'll probably come across some different features that are interesting, and that will still make your experience with Wooclap even more interesting moving on. So thank you all for your answers. And now before I move on to the next part where I tell you about how to create your own content, I think it's important to quickly inform you that Wooclap integrates into all of the applications and tools that you already use. And using these integrations allows you to have really everything in one place. That's not adding a layer of complexity to what can already be an overwhelming amount of tools to use. So now that you've had the chance to experience Wooclap from the student's point of view, let's see how you can create your own interactive content and integrate it into your next presentations. Okay. Now this page that you can see here is the page that you arrive on once you've created your Wooclap account. So this is the main page with all of the events that I've previously created. So if I want to go ahead and create questions for my new course, for my, let's say for my geography class tomorrow, for example, I'm going to go ahead and in the top left corner, I'm going to press on create event. And then I'm going to arrive on this main page. So the first step really is to rename your event. So for example, I'm going to call it geography, and maybe for my class tomorrow, 27. And we consider one event to be one unique class that you're teaching. So now that I've renamed my event, in the top left corner, the next thing and what really pops up and what you really see automatically is all of the question types in the central banner here. So as you can see, I can go through all of my 17 different question types here in the middle. And then I'm going to go ahead and maybe pick a first one, maybe a label on image, maybe a multiple choice. Let's start off with a multiple choice question, for example. All I have to do is go ahead and press on multiple choice here. And I'm going to go right into this interface where I have to type my question at the top. For example, what is the capital of Peru? Is it Lima? Is it Paris? Or is it Santiago? And then I'm going to select the correct answer and press on save. On the right-hand side for each question type, there's always going to be different features and options to personalize. So here I could have added that multiple answers are possible, but of course that doesn't apply to this question. So now I'm going to go ahead and save that question. And as you can see, it now appears under the instructions to connect right here. So then I'm going to move on maybe to a second type of question, maybe a polling question. For example, do you understand the notion of GDP? Maybe a yes or no question. And then again, all I have to do is press on save. And finally, maybe we can try one of our newer types of questions, maybe a label on image question. So I'm going to click here on label on image, and I'm going to upload a picture. So here I'm uploaded a picture, which is a map of South America. And I can then add the instructions at the top, name the following countries. And then as you can see, I have the different labels. So here, first is Brazil. And then all I have to do is click again. Number 2 is Colombia. And then let's put number 3 below is Peru. And then all I have to do is save my question. So now, as you can see, all of the questions that we just created together are here in the central banner under the questions. I can change the order of them if I wish to by just dragging and dropping as well. And and then all I have to do, I can already get started and I can already start presenting all of this content if I wish to by just pressing here on the How to Participate button. Now, an optional step there is before doing this is to change the link that you're going to share. So here, for example, I could call it Geo 2710. And this would then be the link that my students would connect with. So I'm going to press on click to copy here, and I'm going to share it with you in the chat. And we'll be able to connect in just a second. And now, if I want to launch my event, all I have to do is press on start beside how to participate. And I'm already displaying the instructions to connect to my event. Now you can either click on the link that I've put in the chat. You can also scan the QR code that's on the screen. And this is just to show you how quickly. So really just to recap on those different steps that we went through. First step, create an event and rename it. Then just select your question type in the central banner. And then all you have to do is beside the instructions where it says how to participate, press on start. And it's going to already display all of the instructions to connect to the event. And then once you have a number at the bottom right here that you're comfortable with, you can then move on to your interactive content just the same way you would do with any other type of presentation by clicking on either the arrow here or the arrow on my keyboard as well. So this is just for testing purposes, so I won't spend too much time waiting for everyone to connect. There'll be another opportunity, of course, to connect in a moment. So now moving on to my interactive content. Do you understand the notion of GDP? As you can see, just as easy as that, I can already have all of my class participating in my event. Oh, my apologies. I had a little problem with my computer there. It froze for a bit. So perfect. So as you can see, I can see again, I have 9 out of 14 answers. And then I can move on to my second question if I wish to. So as you can see, it was just that easy to connect to my event and collect all of the answers. And thank you all again for your participation. Once I've collected all the answers that I want, you'll be able to see that I can display the answers on the interface, on my interface here. So I can lock in and display the correct answer, and that's going to be shown on your interface as a student as well. So you're able to see if you got the correct answer, both on your interface as a participant and on the interface of the person projecting as well. So now we'll be able to answer this question in just a bit. Now I'm going to go further into the explanations. So as you saw at the beginning, I was going at the beginning of this presentation of this tutorial session, I was going directly from the slides that I created directly into the contents that I'd created. And of course, this is possible by uploading a presentation into Wooclap. And I'm going to show you how you can upload your presentation, import it into Wooclap, and then insert your questions into your presentation. So you can just easily go from that content that you've prepared to your interactive content and so on. So to add a presentation to Wooclap, you're going to go either press on Add Presentation here, or on the little wheel here and Add Presentation. So you can, of course, upload a PDF, a PowerPoint, or Google Slides. And now I'm going to upload a presentation. One thing to keep in mind is that when we import a presentation into Wooclap, it's imported in a PDF format, which means that it's a static format, and that any animations and transitions that you've created on PowerPoint won't be supported on Wooclap website. There is a workaround for this. We do have a Wooclap add-in in the PowerPoint store. So you can import questions that you've created on Wooclap on the website directly into the PowerPoint application if you wish to. Now, the way that we recommend using it really is on the website, because the user experience is just that much more fluid and easy to use. So I'm going to show you now how you can insert your questions. So of course, the insert question button is where you want to go, just underneath your presentation here. I'm going to press on insert questions, and this tutorial shows up, but I'm going to show you myself today how to insert the questions. So I'm just going to close it. So as you can see on the left-hand side now, I have all of the slides that I've imported. And then on the right-hand side, I have all of the questions that we've just created together. So now, for example, if I want students to participate maybe after the introduction slide, just to get to know if they have that knowledge of what GDP is, to know if I maybe need to, repeat that notion at the beginning of my class, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop by just selecting, dragging, and dropping the How to Participate button, which is the instructions to participate, to connect, sorry. Then I'm going to drag and drop my first question here. Then maybe I want my students to answer this question after slide 5, and maybe this question at the end of my presentation. And then all I have to do is press on Save, which will bring me back to this interface here. And then if I press on Start here on the presentation, I can very easily go directly from my content to the interactive content that we just created together, just that easily. So it's really as easy as that, creating your questions, pressing on Insert Questions, and then just dragging and dropping your questions into your presentation. So I'm just gonna, before I move on to the different features and different things to activate, I'm just gonna check to see if there are any questions. And it seems that my colleague Anais has it all under control. Great, perfect. So yeah, and I'd say that most of the questions that you also have will probably be answered in this next part as well. So now we're going to go into the different settings that you can see on the right-hand side here that are really going to enable you to personalize and customize your experience with the tool. So now the first option that you can see here is the authentication option and the authentication button. So if I activate this here, there's different options that are here. So this authentication is what I'm going to require participants or students to have to connect to my events. So I can require for students to connect via email, via social, which means either Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, or Microsoft login, or via the SSO if that's been activated for your institution and you're already a client. Now, I'm not going to activate any of these today, but I will activate a more informal way of authentication, and that's the participant username. So participant username requires users to just choose their own username to connect to the event. There are some advantages to not activating authentication. If you don't activate authentication, you're sort of liberating the speech. It might be easier for students to speak freely if they feel that they're not necessarily accountable for what they're saying. Of course, that has its limits because they aren't accountable for what they're saying. But then again, authentication, when it's activated, also gives you access to a grid and report. So it'll enable you to have an understanding of each student's understanding of the different notions. And we'll look into that in just a second. So now I've activated participant username, and I'm going to activate and deactivate all of these buttons, and I'll have you connect one last time after, and we'll be able to see how all of these look and feel when they're activated. So the next button and feature that you see is results visible by default. Now, as you saw when I was presenting, as I was receiving the input, everything was changing live. But maybe I might not want that because maybe I don't want students to be influenced by the answers of other students. So if I deactivate this button here, I keep the power of basically being able to display the answers when I wish to display them, and then display the correct answer. So we'll see in just a second exactly what that looks like. Now, the next button you see here is the I'm confused button. So if I activate this button, students on their interface will have the option of pressing on the button, stating that they're confused, and that's going to be displayed on the presenter's interface. So he can take into account that 6, 7, 8 people are confused, and it allows him to take in that information without necessarily interrupting the flow of his presentation. And then he can come back to something, to a certain notion, whenever he feels ready to do it. So I've activated it, and we'll be able to see what that looks like in just a second. Now, another way that you can interact with teachers throughout a presentation is also through messages. Now, under the title of your event and beside the Votes tab is a Messages tab here. And you have various messages options. So I can activate the wall messages, likes, and images. So this is giving the possibility to the participants on their end to send in a message to the teacher or the person presenting. And the person presenting can then display that message to the whole class. These aren't private messages between the student and the professor. These are really messages that will then be projected to the whole class. And we're going to see what that looks like in just a second then. Then the next button that you can see is the competition mode. So the competition mode here only works if you've activated some form of authentication, but it enables you as a presenter at any time of your choice to display a podium of the participants that have given or collected the most points and that have given the most correct answers. So it's a way of sort of gamifying your class and kind of playing on that competitive side of students. And it can really be a good way of snapping them back into a very active stance in class. So we'll see what that looks like now in a second when I have you participate again. So now I'm going to go ahead and reset my event, which means that I'm going to erase all the previously collected answers. So I'm going to go ahead and press on reset here. And now I'm going to ask you to connect one last time for today. I've added the link again. In the chat, I've added the link again. And you can also connect again by scanning the QR code if you wish to. And I'll give you a bit of time now. I see that already 2 people have found the messages on their end. So good going, you found it. And now we'll look at all of these features that we've activated together. I'll give you another little bit of time. Maybe I'll take a look at the messages that I'm receiving already. Bonjour. So this is what the messages interface looks like then. So as you can see, I can go into messages here, and then I have all of the messages appear at the top, and then I can bring one to the attention by just clicking on it, of course, to the attention of the whole class if I wish to. Just like that. And I can also see it in a list format if I wish to. And I can make them bigger by using this at the bottom of my screen, as you can see here, and then smaller again. Okay, I think there's about 9 people on it. Now I can move on to the interactive content, and we'll see. Maybe I'll move to this one, and we'll see the difference with all the features that we just activated. So as you can see now, as I'm receiving all of the input, it's not being displayed live. So I don't have the risk of students being influenced by the answers of others. Here I can see at the bottom of my screen that I have around 11 answers out of the 14 connected. And then I can, when I'm ready, I can go ahead and display the correct answer. Display the answers collected here, and then display the correct answer as well. And then I can move on to our newest type of question. Name the following countries. 1, 2, and 3. So you have to answer for all 3. That's cheating because you saw me create the question. Still, so I can see now that I've collected I've collected 2 answers. So I'll give you a little bit more time. It takes a bit more time as there are 3 answers to give here. And maybe for those that have answered, then maybe look for that I'm confused button to see where that is on your interface and what it looks like when you click on it. So I can see now that the number of I'm confused are going up here at the top of my screen. So again, as a teacher, then I have the possibility to say to go back to that whenever I feel that it's all right. And then when I've re-explained the notion, I can reset the number by pressing here. Or I can also ask my students, okay, now if you're no longer confused, please press on the button again. So then I can see the number go back down to 0. And then whenever I'm ready, I can move on. So now that I have about 7 answers, I'm going to go ahead and display the correct answer. The correct answers, and I see about 29% got this one correct, 14% for this one, and 43% for number 1. And then, of course, when I'm finished with my questions, I can go ahead and display the podium that we activated together as well. So to do that, I'm going to go into the bottom of my screen here beside messages. You can see there's a little trophy. So when I click on that, then I can display the podium of the best participants. So congratulations to Jonathan, scored an impressive 3 points. And then I can show the top 5 as well, but also the top 10 and the top 20 if I wish to. And there we go. I can see there's some other messages, so I'm just going to check if there are any other messages. Can I have the messages in another tab from the questions? You can see them as a teacher in advance if you use the moderator view. Otherwise, you display them on the messages tab here. Okay, I think that's it for that. Great. And I'm going to check one more time if there are any questions in the moderators. Okay, great. So a question. There seemed to be a question. What does the heart button do? I think this displays basically the ones where there's been a like on an answer, if I'm correct. And I'm just checking if there are any other questions. Okay, it seems like we're good to move on. And now I'm going to show you, of course, the grid and report options. So, of course, it's something that I said at the beginning of the presentation, but it really is one of the big values of using digital tools is that all of that data that you're collecting from students or your audience can ultimately be turned into valuable insights, whether it's an insight into the understanding of a student on an individual level, or an insight into the understanding of a whole class, but also ultimately insights into your teaching. So and we'll see just how you can see that from these options. So the first option that you can see is to export all of your results to an Excel file. You might want to do this if you want to keep a file on hand, or if you want to further analyze them and maybe create your own graphs and all that. That's possible by exporting all your results to an Excel file. In Wooclap, you can see everything in a grid format. So here, if I press on grid, I can see each user on the left-hand side here, and then per question, the answers that they gave, as you can see here. So it really gives me on an individual level an understanding for each student of their understanding of these different notions. But then at the bottom as well, I'm going to get the percentage for each question of correct answers. So then moving on to the report format is going to give me more of a screenshot of the answers that I collected per question. So here, for example, I can see that 100% most people got that answer correct. So maybe I don't need to spend too much time on that notion there. And then, for example, in the grid format, I can see here for this question, question 3, that only 16% of the answers were correct. So that's really giving me insight into the understanding of the class as a whole. So then moving on, when I'm preparing maybe my next class, I can think, well, maybe this question wasn't completely understood. Traditionally, you would have to maybe wait until an exam to have an understanding of that, or wait to maybe call out on different students, or maybe just by feeling, knowing what students understand or not. But these questions and this reporting options really give you that insight into the understanding of the class. So here I know that this question, question 3 here, needs more focus from the class, and I need to make maybe some extra resources available to my students so they can go over that content, or maybe I need to repeat this content at the beginning of next class. But of course, another way you can do it is to make some resources available to them asynchronously. So everything we saw up till now was uses of Wooclap in a live setting, whether it's in person or at distance, but this was all live setting. But of course, there are ways of using Wooclap asynchronously, and I'm going to show you now shortly how you can do that. So in order to create an asynchronous questionnaire, under the title, the third tab that you see here is participant pace. So as you can see now, I have two options, either to create a questionnaire or to add some files. So here I can, for example, import some resources that I make available. Then once I press on publish here, they're going to be shared with anyone that has this link, and they'll be able to download these resources on their device. And then I can go ahead and create a questionnaire as well that I can make available asynchronously. Now, the first step is to rename this questionnaire. So I'm going to call it, for example, revision geography class, and then confirm. And then I have the option to either import questions. So I can import questions, for example, from my class, today's class. If you remember, name the following question only had about 16% of correct answers. So maybe it's important for my students to review that as it wasn't completely understood as a notion. So I'm going to import that. I could also put in for example, a question, a rating question on their understanding of different terms. So I could put a question of rate on a scale of 1 to 5, your understanding of this term, that term, that term. So I have a little understanding of my students' comprehension, and I can import questions from any of my events and create any of my questions here in the central banner. Then all I have to do once I'm comfortable with all the questions that I've prepared is press on save. And then I'm going to have the option to either publish now or publish later. So here I'm going to press, just because we're just using this event at the moment, I'll press on publish later. And once that's published, again, all I have to do is share this link that we have here with the students, and they'll be able to connect to this asynchronous questionnaire that you've created. And then you're going to have the option of viewing all of the results that you've collected in the grid and report format here, in the same way that you had it here. So it'll be the same presentation, but this will only show you the answers to the asynchronous questionnaire that you created after your class, for example. So that was it for the demo part. I still have a little bit of content to show you on some different use cases. But before that, I'm going to check one more time to see if there are any questions. So there's a question from Jonathan. Sorry, can you repeat how you brought that up, please? That being the number of correct answers in the grid questions. Yes, of course. So in the grid here, on the right-hand side. So again, if you don't see this when you're on your interface, you just need to press on the wheel, and then at the bottom, go into the grid format, and then when you slide to the bottom, you can see the average for each question, the average of correct answers. There we go. Hope that answers your question, Jonathan. And I think that was all that there was for me, at least. And yeah, so I can move on to maybe some more concrete examples and some use cases. And then, of course, I'll have some even more time for you for questions at the end of this training session. All right. Okay. So yeah, let's make the most of this extra time we have today to go into more detail into some interesting ways to use our tool, and I'd like to share some best practices on and show you some concrete examples on how you can use Wooclap before, during, and after classes. So when you start your course, of course, instead of diving headfirst into the subject, into the theory, it might be interesting to take some time to bond with and bring students together in a more informal and fun setting, where you know that when we're teaching at a distance as well, it can be difficult and it can feel very one-sided when you're looking at a screen or a bunch of black screens rather. So engaging your student allows you to, first of all, know someone's out there, but also to get them to be a part of the conversation and get them to start interacting with you and with each other as well. So, of course, one way you can do that, for example, is to engage your students through an icebreaker question, get them talking about themselves. So you could ask them, where are you from? Or sort of in the way that I did it at the beginning here, I asked you, where are you connecting from? And then you can get that conversation going in the chat or in class and live. You could also ask about a recent event or their mood. There are very different ways of doing this. We have some resources on different icebreaker questions that we use, so don't hesitate to look into those as well. And yeah, it's just an important way to create a rapport with students and yeah, make them feel like they're part of the conversation, of course. Another way you can start off a class, of course, is to repeat important questions from a previous class. So this will allow students, of course, to consolidate. So going back to that pillar that we saw at the beginning of our session today, going back to that pillar consolidation. So this allows them to consolidate these notions and move them towards their long-term memory while also giving you insight into their comprehension of these notions. So as you saw, you remember when we were in the grid format and we saw that only 16% of the class got that answer correct. So maybe I want to bring that question then at the beginning of next class, just to make sure that I can move on and that piece of information has been learned by my class. Now, finally, and open questions are also a great way of starting a class. So it's a great way to introduce a new term or notion by asking an open question. It really allows you to get the conversation going and gain insight into the class's knowledge. And if you're starting off maybe with a marketing class, so what words come to mind when you think about marketing? So you're going to get all these key terms coming up, and it really gets that conversation going. Every student has an opportunity to participate. And of course, again, with the visual aspect of the word cloud, you're really able to differentiate just words that come up once from words that come up multiple times. So you can really see a trend in the different answers that are being given by your students or by the members of your audience. Then throughout the class, of course, it's important to use questions throughout the class. We saw that some questions can be used to validate and confirm confirmation. And I think I'd like to stress that it's also important to vary the ways in which you engage your students. And that's the advantage of having 16 different question types. You can see here an example of a sorting question, but there's really a lot of different question types that you can use. And I think the more you vary the type of question that you use, the more engaged the student will be, because for him, it's always a newer experience. It's also a different way of thinking according to the different way that the question is asked. So just really stressing the importance of varying the type of questions that you use. So at the end of the class, for example, you could have students summarize different notions in a brainstorming question that you can see here on the screen. You could also imagine using this type of question at the beginning of the class, for example, to get a conversation going on a question that's going to frame your whole class. So again, the key is to diversify the question types and activities to always move students away from the passive stance and towards an active stance in your class. And then finally, after class, again, this, in my opinion, is where a big part of the value of digital tool lies. All of that data that I'm collecting can be turned into insight into my class's understanding, into individual understanding, but also insight ultimately into my teaching. If I'm reusing the same questions in my various classes, and I see that in each class, students are always struggling with question number 2 or question number 3, well, ultimately, that's giving me insight into the way that I'm teaching, because I can say maybe I need to focus a bit more on this content because students are struggling a bit with it. And maybe then I can see that question 1 is always almost on 100% success rate. So maybe I don't need to spend as much time on that content, and I can readjust the time that I spend on different notions. So it's really giving me that visibility outside of exams, outside of asking directly a student directly. I can have that visibility of the whole class's understanding of these different terms. And I can really personalize the experience that I'm giving to my students and adapt everything to their needs. And then finally, the key is to base, of course, all the resources that you make available asynchronously to the insights that you got in the grid. And this way you're offering the most personalized experience for the biggest number. And I think that's really, again, one of the big values of using digital tools. So I hope this has made you want to use these different functions. And now I say your turn. And I'm going to go ahead and check if there are any questions, even though I know my colleagues are very quick at answering them. So I can see there's a question from Guy. Is there a way to use an event with several classes and have the answers and results separated by groups without having to duplicate the event? Yes, you can do that with the comparison mode. So I can show you how to do that. So there isn't the option to create a session on an event. So you could create, as you said, a duplicate of an event, but you can also create in the comparison mode. So I've created it here. So if I create the comparison mode, basically allows me to go on an event and press on compare, and that's going to create a duplicate of an event. And then the main advantage of that is that I have different display options. So here I have all of my answers that I've got in this class, but then I have the comparison mode option, which at the bottom left, which allows me to compare the answers of one session, session 1, with the answers of session 2. But I think going into Guy's question, you were probably asking if it was possible to add different sessions to one event. No, you would have to duplicate the event every time. I'm going to check if there are any other questions. It seems that there are no questions. Show you one option that I think is also very important. Of course, creating content takes a bit of time, and you might be using some content that some of your colleagues are using as well. So of course, there are ways to share all of these resources between colleagues. So there's two different ways that you can share with your colleagues. So you can either, on your presentation here, I can go into more settings on the right-hand side, and then I can scroll down here and press on share this event with another user by giving them the code open training here. So if I activate this here and then scroll down and press on save, this code that I have here, if I'm going to go ahead and share it with my my colleague once I've activated that button, and then my colleague, when he goes ahead and creates an event, just beside create an event, he can press on import event. And then by using that code that I've shared with him, open training here, all he has to do is press on import. And there you go. He's created a copy of the event that I've created. And he'll be able to profit from all of the questions that I've created, from my presentation even, and all of the settings that I've used. So that was one way to collaborate. Another way you can collaborate with a colleague is only if you are part of a custom plan, will you be able to add a collaborator to an event, and you would email him, put in his email address, and he would be able to work on an event at the same time as you. So you'll be able to co-construct an event together and really create all of that content together. Now, yeah, so also keep in mind that in the next day, I'd say maybe tomorrow, you'll also receive a replay of the webinar. You'll also receive a link to an asynchronous questionnaire that I've created. So you'll have the opportunity to see what it's like to do the asynchronous questionnaire. And there will be some different resources on Wooclap, and also some questions to get a bit of feedback on this training session. And you'll also receive a form that you can complete in less than a minute in order to receive a Wooclap training certificate if you want to. And this certificate will really attest that you've participated in this training session, and you can feel free to share it with your school, your colleagues, or on social media, of course. Yeah, and I think the idea of this training session is also to keep it light enough so that it's not overwhelming in terms of quantity of information, so that you don't feel that you're coming away from this session with a headache, and rather that you're coming away with maybe energized and wanting to use the tool. It's quite intuitive, it's quite easy, and we really recommend to just play around with it really, and create your own events, try out the different question types, and you can also just try them out on yourself or on colleagues, and just play around with it a bit as you're starting. And don't hesitate if you have any other questions. I see Nadia has asked, will we have a recording of this webinar? You'll be sent a replay of it tomorrow, sometime tomorrow. And we still have 5 minutes together, so don't hesitate if you have any other questions. Maybe I can put in I can put in maybe last word cloud. Let's put in a last, I'll add the link again. If you want to answer the word cloud. And I'm just checking to see if there are any other questions. Seems that we're good. Do you use the matching type? The matching type is a type of question that is available, of course, as a part of the 16 different question types. Absolutely. A question from Jonathan, maybe more of an abstract question. Why Woo? Fortunately, I wasn't there when this company was founded, so I'm not sure I have the answer to that one. Again, show you some of the different display options, just as a little reminder. I can bring them all to the attention. So here, some words are coming up more than others. So they'll probably be made bigger. Merci's come up. Well, so Anais has come in with the answer there. I just saw. Very thorough answer. Thanks to all my colleagues in the chat as well for keeping an eye out on all the questions so I can focus on the presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you all for connecting today. I hope you come away from this wanting to try out the tool. Thank you all. If there are any last minute questions, I'll give it another 2 minutes. Who knows? Otherwise, again, our help center has a lot of very concise and good articles. Thank you all also for your participation. I know you're asking a lot of questions. It's great to see. And you're answering all my questions, which makes it a lot easier on my side as well. Yeah, and don't hesitate to share these open trainings with your colleagues as well. There's going to be another open training session, which will be like this one in about a bit less than a month in November. So don't hesitate to tell them about this, and check out some of our other resources on our blog and YouTube page. And thanks again, everyone, for coming today. It's time to end the event. And yeah, thanks for all your participation, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.